The math said he should be dead. By the end of the day, history said otherwise. March 10, 1945. 2:18 hours. Over the western edge of Tokyo. The B-29 is already burning. Not catastrophically. Not yet. But something is wrong in the skin of the aircraft. The vibration is uneven. The interphone crackles with clipped, controlled voices that are already doing the arithmetic. Altitude, 7,000 feet. Airspeed, 230 miles per hour. Weight, still heavy with fuel returning from target. This is lower than doctrine. Lower than comfort. Lower than safety. The aircraft is part of the March 9th to 10th night incendiary raid, the largest single bombing attack of the Pacific War. More than 330 B-29 Superfortresses crossed the Japanese coast in waves, stripped of defensive altitude and most of their armor to carry more fire. The planners knew what they were trading. So did the men inside. The aircraft commander grips the yoke and keeps his voice even. Oxygen masks hide faces. Sweat pools inside gloves despite the winter air leaking through seams. The smell is hot oil, cordite residue, and insulation beginning to cook. Below them, Tokyo is already burning. Not in isolated fires, but in sheets. Wind pushes flame laterally across entire districts. The glow reaches up through the aircraft's belly and paints the fuselage orange from beneath. This is when the first fighter arrives. The radar operator doesn't have time to call it out. The tail gunner does. Bandit. 6 o'clock low. Japanese night fighters had learned quickly. No long turning engagements. No wasted ammunition. They climbed beneath the bombers, using the glow of the city as backlight, and fired upward into wings and engines. Some carried upward firing cannon. Others carried nothing at all except reinforced noses and orders that did not include coming back. The first pass is fast. Too fast. Tracer lines stitch past the tail. Something strikes the right wing root, metal on metal, a dull hammering sound rather than an explosion. The aircraft shudders. The engineer calls out engine temperatures. They are rising but still inside the red line. The gunners hold fire. Ammunition is finite. Every .50 caliber round is counted, even now. The second fighter doesn't fire. It closes. The pilot sees it in peripheral vision, a dark shape rising at an angle that makes no sense for a firing pass. The co-pilot starts to say something and stops. The impact comes from below and behind. It is not violent in the way explosions are violent. It is a blunt, structural violence. A tearing sensation. The entire aircraft jerks forward as if grabbed by the tail and shaken. The interphone explodes with voices. Tails hit. Jesus, he rammed us. Control check, now. The Japanese fighter disintegrates on contact. The bomber does not. The vertical stabilizer is damaged. Control cables shudder. The tail gunner reports that his position is still pressurized but twisted slightly off axis. His guns still traverse. For now. They keep flying. No one says it, but the calculation is immediate. A single B-29, damaged, alone at low altitude, over the largest defended city in the empire, during the most concentrated raid of the war. This is where aircraft are lost. The third fighter comes in 5 minutes later. This one fires. Short burst. The top turret answers. The sky behind them fills with crossing lines of red and white. The fighter brakes, climbs, then turns back in. It does not pull away in time. Another impact. Smaller than the first, but closer to the fuselage. Something scrapes along the tailplane and vanishes. The aircraft lurches left. Warning lights flash, then stabilize. 2 rammings. The engineer reads the panel again. Hydraulic pressure is down but holding. Elevator response is sluggish but present. Fuel lines are intact. Fire extinguishers are armed. The aircraft commander does not order the crew to bail out. There is nowhere to go. Below them is a firestorm and debris. Above them are more fighters. The radio operator logs the time. 2:31 hours. By now, Japanese defenses are fully awake. Searchlights claw at the sky, not to track individual bombers but to disorient formations. Anti-aircraft fire is sporadic at this altitude. Ineffective but constant, like thrown gravel. The fighters keep coming. They come singly now, then in pairs. They attack from below, from the side, from head-on passes meant to force the bomber to flinch. The gunners begin firing in earnest. Each turret has limits, traverse arcs, elevation caps, ammunition belts that run dry faster than expected when adrenaline erases restraint. The top turret tracks a fighter crossing left to right. The gunner leads properly, squeezes, and watches the enemy aircraft snap apart at the wing root. The tally is not announced. It is not discussed. The next fighter is claimed by the tail, then another by the right blister gun. Each engagement lasts seconds. Each one costs ammunition and attention and composure. Inside the bomber, the temperature fluctuates wildly. Cold drafts cut through damaged skin. Then sudden heat as flames below surge higher. The men are dehydrated already. Their mouths are dry. Their hands shake when not actively working. The aircraft commander realizes something else now. They are no longer just surviving. They are drawing fighters. A damaged bomber that does not fall becomes a magnet. Japanese pilots see it lagging slightly behind the stream, its silhouette irregular, its flight imperfect. It looks killable. The navigator marks their position relative to the coast. They are still over the city. Still inbound traffic behind them. Still time before they can turn east and run for water. The interphone is quieter now. Not calm. Focused. Another contact is called. Then another. The math continues to change. Rounds fired. Fighters destroyed. Structural damage accumulating. Crew fatigue compounding minute by minute. By the end of this night, the numbers will stop making sense to anyone who studies them afterward. But for now, at 2:47 hours over Tokyo, the only thing that matters is that the bomber is still airborne. And the fighters are not done yet. The fourth attack comes from above. That alone is unusual. Japanese pilots had learned that diving from altitude wasted energy and time. But this pilot commits anyway, rolling inverted briefly to line up a deflection shot across the bomber's nose. The nose gunner sees the shadow first. No tracer yet. Just movement against the firelit clouds. Contact. 1 o'clock high. The fighter fires late. The rounds pass ahead of the cockpit, ripping through empty air. The nose guns respond instantly. Twin. 50s chatter in short bursts. The recoil vibrates through the forward fuselage. The fighter pulls up too steeply. It stalls for half a second, just long enough. The top turret finishes it. A clean hit. The aircraft snaps sideways and drops, its engine already on fire before gravity takes over. No one cheers. There is no time. Ammunition checks follow automatically now. Each gunner reports belt status. Numbers are lower than anyone wants to hear. The tail has burned through nearly a third of its supply already. The bomber is still trailing the formation. Not dramatically, but enough. Below, the firestorm intensifies. Wind speeds inside the burning districts exceed 30 miles per hour, drawing oxygen inward and feeding the flames. Smoke columns punch upward, thick enough to buffet the aircraft. Visibility comes and goes in seconds. The engineer reports a slow oil leak from the No. 3 engine. Not critical yet, but oil pressure is trending down. They agree to nurse it rather than shut it down. Losing power now would mean losing altitude they cannot afford to give up. At 2:59 hours, the fifth fighter arrives. This one approaches from a dead astern, just below the tailplane. The tail gunner tracks him smoothly. He waits. He lets the fighter close. The Japanese aircraft fires first. Cannon shells burst short. One detonates close enough to rattle teeth. Shrapnel pings across the fuselage. The tail gunner fires a sustained burst. The belts feed cleanly. The tracers walk forward. The fighter disintegrates almost directly behind the bomber, fragments passing underneath and vanishing into the smoke. The shockwave rocks the tail again. The gunner reports minor structural damage but no loss of control. The aircraft commander glances at the clock. They have been under continuous attack for more than 30 minutes. This is not normal. Japanese air defenses are not supposed to be this coordinated at night, not at this altitude, not after a raid of this scale. But the low-level approach has changed the geometry of the fight. Fighters can climb quickly from nearby fields. They do not need long vectors. And they are not breaking off. Another pair comes in from port. The left blister gun opens fire immediately. One fighter turns away. The other presses in, firing as he comes. Rounds strike the left wing. Fuel does not ignite. Luck, nothing else. The wing flexes. The aircraft rolls slightly right before the pilot corrects. The left gunner keeps firing until the fighter fills his sight picture. The enemy aircraft erupts in flame at less than 300 yards. The second fighter tries to pull vertical. The top turret tracks him through the climb and fires until the silhouette breaks apart against the smoke. That makes 8. No one says the number aloud. The radio operator is bleeding now. A fragment from an earlier near miss has cut through his sleeve and lodged shallowly in his arm. He has wrapped it tightly with gauze and keeps working. There is no med kit time. No spare hands. The navigator recalculates fuel again. They are burning more than planned. Drag from damage. Power adjustments. Time spent maneuvering instead of cruising. The bomber finally reaches the eastern edge of the city. For the first time in nearly an hour, the glow begins to fade behind them. Black water replaces flame beneath the aircraft as they cross the coast. The pilot exhales. Just once. It is premature. Japanese fighters follow them out over the bay. The next attack is coordinated. 3 aircraft approach from different angles. 1 high, 1 low, 1 crossing from starboard. The bomber's gunners split targets instinctively. The nose turret fires upward. The right blister engages the crossing fighter. The tail tracks the low approach. Tracer fire intersects the night in violent geometry. The crossing fighter explodes first. The nose gunner claims the high 1 seconds later, the aircraft breaking apart mid-roll. The low fighter keeps coming. He does not fire. He does not pull away. The tail gunner sees the intent immediately. Rammer. 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 There is no time to maneuver. The bomber is too heavy. Too slow to dodge cleanly. The fighter strikes the tailplane at an oblique angle. The impact is catastrophic for the smaller aircraft and devastating but survivable for the bomber. Metal tears. Control surfaces shudder violently. The bomber drops nearly 400 feet before the pilot regains partial control. Warning lights bloom across the panel. The engineer calls out damage in clipped phrases. Elevator authority is degraded. The tail gunner reports his position partially collapsed, but he is still conscious. His guns are jammed now, twisted by the impact. That makes 2 fighters that have rammed them. And they are still flying. The pilot trims constantly, fighting the aircraft rather than guiding it. Every control input requires force now. The bomber wants to nose down. It wants to roll left. The formation ahead is gone. They are alone over black water, illuminated only by moonlight and the occasional flash of distant fires. Another fighter approaches. This one is cautious. He circles at a distance, probing, waiting for an opening. The top turret tracks him but does not fire. Ammunition is too low to waste. The fighter finally commits. He dives shallow, firing a long burst. The right blister gun answers. The gunner leads carefully, conserving rounds. The fighter explodes mid-dive, the fireball reflecting off the bomber's scarred skin. That is 10. The crew is exhausted now. Physically shaking. Hands numb from cold and recoil. Throats raw from oxygen masks and shouting. The engineer reports that number 3 engine oil pressure has dropped below safe limits. They shut it down. The bomber yaws hard. The pilot compensates. Airspeed drops. Altitude bleeds away slowly, relentlessly. They are still hundreds of miles from base. And there is still time left before dawn. The math is changing again. Not in their favor. The bomber settles into a fragile equilibrium. 3 engines pulling. 1 dead and windmilling despite the feather. Rudder trim near its limit. Elevator response delayed. Heavy. Altitude stabilizes at 5,800 feet. That number matters. Below it, the margin disappears. At this weight, with this damage, there is no guarantee the aircraft can climb again. The navigator confirms their heading. East-southeast, outbound over open water. The nearest friendly fields are far beyond reach. The only viable option is to stay airborne until daylight and hope the aircraft holds together. No one says it, but every man understands the unspoken constraint. If another engine fails, the story ends here. The radar operator picks up intermittent contacts. Faint returns. Fighters are still present, but their attacks are less aggressive now. Japanese pilots are low on fuel. Some have already spent their ammunition. Others are circling, waiting for a mistake. The bomber does not give them one. The pilot flies gently now. No sharp corrections. No abrupt changes in power. Every movement is smoothed out, measured, and deliberate. The aircraft commander's arms ache from holding pressure against damaged controls. Sweat freezes at the collar of his flight suit. At 3:21 hours, the next fighter commits. He comes from starboard, low, climbing into the bomber's blind spot. The right blister gunner cannot see him until the last moment. The fighter fires first. Rounds punch through the outer wing panel. One detonates inside the wing, shredding structural ribs but missing the fuel cell by feet. The right gunner fires a short, controlled burst. The fighter breaks upward, trailing smoke, then disintegrates as the top turret joins in. That makes 11. The number exists only in the after-action reports that will be written later. In the aircraft, it registers only as another absence, another threat that will not return. Ammunition is now critically low in multiple positions. The tail is effectively silent. The left blister has less than 200 rounds remaining. The nose turret is conserving aggressively, firing only when probability is high. The aircraft commander orders strict fire discipline. If the next attack is not clean, they may not be able to stop it. The radio operator attempts to transmit a damage report. Static overwhelms the signal. Japanese jamming is intermittent but effective. He logs the attempt and waits. Minutes stretch. The sky ahead is empty, but the tension does not ease. Every vibration is suspect. Every fluctuation in engine sound draws immediate attention. The engineer's eyes never leave the panel. Oil pressure on number 2 is wavering. Not dangerously. Yet. The navigator recalculates fuel again. They will not make it home with reserve. They might make it with fumes. At 3:38 hours, another fighter appears, alone, aggressive, fast. This one attacks head-on. The nose gunner sees the silhouette grow rapidly, the closing speed enormous. There is no room for error here. A collision would be fatal for both. The nose turret fires a single long burst. The fighter fires back. Traces pass close enough to flash across the cockpit windows. One round strikes the forward fuselage, punching through aluminum and vanishing behind the navigator station. The Japanese aircraft exploded barely 150 yards ahead of the bomber. The shockwave buffets the nose. Debris flashes past the cockpit like thrown gravel. That makes 12. The aircraft commander swallows hard. His mouth is dry. His hands ache. He has been awake for nearly 20 hours, flying for more than 10. The bomber is losing altitude again. Slowly, steadily. The engineer increases power on the remaining engines, flirting with limits. Cylinder head temperatures creep upward. There is no margin left to trade. Below them, the Pacific is black and indifferent. At 3:52 hours, 2 fighters approach the port. This is the most dangerous configuration left to them. The left blister gunner has limited ammunition and restricted traverse due to wing damage. The fighters split. One climbs. One stays low. The top turret engages the climbing fighter, firing in short bursts. The enemy aircraft rolls, evades, then takes a hit to the fuselage and breaks apart. The low fighter presses in. He fires a burst that rakes the underside of the bomber. Something inside ruptures. The engineer smells fuel but cannot see flames. He calls it out immediately. The left gunner fires anyway. He empties nearly the rest of his belt in one sustained burst. The fighter erupts in flame less than 200 yards away. That makes 13. Silence follows. Not relief. Not calm. Silence. The engineer watches the fuel pressure stabilize. No fire. A leak somewhere, but not catastrophic. Not yet. The left blister gun is now nearly dry. The bomber limps onward, engine straining, airframe scarred, crew exhausted beyond anything training had prepared them for. The sky begins to lighten imperceptibly. It's not dawn yet. Just the faint suggestion of grey at the horizon. The navigator marks the time. 4:11 hours. Another contact appears on radar. Single. Fast. The aircraft commander closes his eyes for a fraction of a second, then opens them and tightens his grip. This one will be decided by seconds. The fighter approaches from below and behind, angling toward the damaged tail. The tail guns are jammed. The top turret has limited depression. The nose cannot reach. Only one gun can bear. The right blister. The gunner adjusts his position, fighting stiffness and fatigue. His hands shake as he lines up the sight. He waits longer than feels safe. Then he fires. A short burst. Controlled. Precise. The fighter catches fire immediately, disintegrating as it passes beneath the bomber's tail. That makes 14. No more contacts appear. The bomber continues east, wounded but intact, engines roaring unevenly into the growing light. Behind them, The smoke of Tokyo fades into the horizon. Ahead of them, survival is no longer about combat. It is about endurance. And the aircraft still has hours to fly. Dawn arrives without ceremony. At 5:02 hours, the eastern horizon resolves into pale grey, then muted blue. The stars vanish one by one. The crew notices only because the cockpit light suddenly feels too bright. The Pacific below is calm. Deceptively so. With daylight comes visibility, and with it, a clearer accounting of damage. The aircraft commander orders a slow visual inspection as much as possible. Gunners lean awkwardly to peer through blister windows. The engineer crawls partway aft, bracing himself against the vibrating fuselage. The tail is mangled. Sections of the vertical stabilizer are missing entirely. Control surfaces are warped, edges torn and uneven. The tail gun position is twisted several degrees off center, its glazing cracked and opaque with soot. The right wing shows multiple holes. Some are clean punctures. Others are ragged, where structure has been torn outward. The left wing is worse. Rib damage, skin deformation, signs of internal scorching. The number 3 engine is fully shut down. Its propeller is feathered but still shudders intermittently, sending vibrations through the wing. Fuel status is critical. The navigator's calculations are now pessimistic by necessity. There are no comfortable margins left. The bomber can reach one place. Maybe two. The aircraft commander calls the crew together on the interphone. His voice is steady. They are too far from alternate fields. Diverting north risks weather and unknown defenses. Turning south adds distance they cannot afford. The only realistic destination is their departure point in the Marianas. Tinian is still over 1,300 miles away. At cruise, with 4 engines, it would be routine. With 3 engines, damage-induced drag, and fuel leaks, it is a gamble. The engineer gives his assessment. Number 2 engine is running hot but stable. Number 1 and 4 are holding. If they keep power conservative and avoid unnecessary corrections, the aircraft should remain controllable. Should. The crew understands the word. No one suggests ditching. Not yet. Daylight improves chances, but ditching a B-29 is a last resort, and survival is uncertain even under ideal conditions. They press on. Hours pass in a haze of vibration, noise, and fatigue. The men rotate tasks where possible. The radio operator dozes in 30-second increments between signal checks. The gunners remain at their stations despite numbness creeping into fingers and toes. The engineer watches temperatures obsessively. Every sound is catalogued. Every change is interrogated. At 7:18 hours, number 2 engine oil pressure dips, then recovers. At 8:04, the aircraft loses another 200 feet before power adjustments arrest the descent. The pilot's forearms burn. His shoulders are locked in a permanent tension. He cannot release pressure without the aircraft beginning to yaw or pitch unpredictably. The navigator updates the distance remaining. 900 miles. Fuel calculations are brutal now. They will arrive light. Very light. There is no allowance for holding or diversion. At 9:37 hours, the radio operator finally makes contact. Weak. Broken. But enough. He transmits their call sign, damage status, and estimated arrival. The reply comes back thin and distorted but unmistakably American. Runways will be clear. Emergency crews will stand by. That knowledge changes nothing mechanically, but it shifts something inside the aircraft. They are no longer alone. The final hours are the hardest. The sun climbs higher. The cockpit grows warm. The smell of oil and scorched metal is constant now, ingrained. Hydration is nearly gone. Some men have not urinated since before takeoff. At 11:22 hours, land appears on the horizon. Low. Flat. Green against blue. The navigator confirms. Tinian. The aircraft commander does not relax. Approach is dangerous with this much damage. Landing a B-29 normally requires precision. Landing one with impaired tail control, asymmetric power, and minimal fuel allows no second attempt. The engineer begins final checks. Fuel selectors are confirmed. Fire bottles are armed. The crew is instructed on crash positions if needed. At 11:49 hours, they enter the traffic pattern. Other aircraft give way immediately. The runway is long, but it has never looked so narrow. The pilot lines up carefully, resisting the urge to overcorrect. Speed is slightly high, intentional. He cannot risk a stall. The descent rate is shallow. At 11:56 hours, the bomber crosses the threshold. The aircraft floats longer than expected. The pilot holds it off, then eases it down. The main wheels touch. The impact is harder than ideal but controlled. The damaged tail shudders violently but holds. The nose wheel settles seconds later. The pilot keeps it straight with rudder and differential power, muscles screaming in protest. The bomber rolls out and slows. It does not have a ground loop. It does not collapse. At 11:58 hours, it stops. Silence follows. Engines wind down. Props tick as they cool. The sudden absence of vibration is disorienting. Crewmen unstrap slowly, stiff and unsteady. Some laugh without humor. Others simply sit, heads down. Ground crews approach cautiously, staring at the damage. They count holes. They count torn panels. They count the ruined tail. They will later count the fighters. 14 destroyed. 2 by deliberate ramming. The math never worked. But the aircraft is here. And every man is alive. The story is not over yet. It simply slows down. Medics reach the aircraft first. Not running. Walking fast. Controlled. They know better than to rush a bomber that has just come back on 3 engines with unknown structural damage. The crew climbs down in stages. The tail gunner is helped out last. His compartment has to be opened from the outside because the internal framing is bent. When he emerges, blinking in daylight, his flight suit is stiff with sweat and grime. He has been braced against twisted metal for hours without realizing it. The radio operator's arm is cleaned and dressed properly now. The fragment is removed. It had stopped less than an inch from bone. No one is carried away on a stretcher. That detail will matter later. Maintenance officers arrive next. Clipboards appear. Cameras. Measuring tapes. They move around the aircraft slowly, almost reverently, as if approaching a wounded animal that might still react. The tail draws immediate attention. Entire sections of aluminum skin are missing. The vertical stabilizer is shredded, its trailing edge uneven and jagged. One ram strike has crushed internal structure inward, the other has torn it outward. Control cables are visible in places, frayed but intact. An officer runs his hand along a bent spar and shakes his head. "This shouldn't have flown," he says quietly. The count begins. Hole after hole is chalked. Small caliber punctures. Cannon tears. Structural scars where metal has been peeled back. The wings alone carry dozens. The fuselage carries more. By the time they stop counting, the number is well over 300. The gunners are debriefed separately. They are exhausted to the point of detachment, answering questions in flat tones. Times. Angles. Ranges. Ammunition expenditure. Which turret fired when. The intelligence officers cross-check accounts. Radar logs. Gun camera footage where available. Fragments recovered from the tail section. The picture that emerges is not dramatic. It is methodical. 14 Japanese fighters were destroyed. Not damaged. Not probable. Destroyed. 2 confirmed by collision. Intentional ramming attacks consistent with late-war Japanese night defense doctrine. The officers do the math the same way the crew had done it in the air. A single bomber. Low altitude. Lagging behind formation. Severely damaged. Statistically, it should not exist on the ramp. The crew is ordered to stand down for the rest of the day. Some sleep immediately, collapsing onto bunks still wearing parts of their gear. Others cannot. Adrenaline lingers. Muscles twitch involuntarily. Hands shake when trying to light cigarettes. The aircraft is grounded indefinitely. Engineers determined that repairing the tail would require extensive structural replacement. The wings need partial reskinning. Internal systems must be inspected end to end. It will fly again eventually. But not soon. The after-action report moves up the chain. Numbers become typed lines. Names become entries. The engagement is classified initially as part of the broader March 9th to 10th operation, one aircraft among hundreds. But the details stand out. 14 interceptors destroyed. Sustained engagement exceeding 90 minutes. The aircraft returned despite catastrophic tail damage. Word spreads anyway. Not as a legend. Not as an exaggeration. As a quiet anomaly. Among crews, the story is told plainly. A bomber that kept flying when it should not have. Gunners who did not panic. A pilot who never lost control even when control itself was compromised. There are no speeches, no immediate decorations. The war does not pause to acknowledge individual survival. The crew flies again weeks later, in another aircraft. They do their jobs the same way. Some of them will not make it to August. Years later, historians will revisit the raid. They will focus on the firestorm, the civilian toll, the shift in strategy, the scale of destruction. Footnotes will mention the air battle briefly. One damaged B-29. 14 fighters were destroyed, returned to base. The math will still look wrong, but the photographs remain. The tail section, twisted and torn. The wing, punctured and blackened. The chalk marks around holes, some circled twice because the counters could not believe how many there were. And the crew lists. Every name followed by the same status. Alive. The aircraft did not change the outcome of the war. It did not alter strategy or policy, but it demonstrated something smaller and more precise. That even in the most calculated, mechanized conflict ever fought, survival could still hinge on discipline, restraint, and endurance measured minute by minute in the dark. And that sometimes, against the arithmetic of war, one machine and the men inside it simply refused to fall. The final meaning of that refusal would only become clear later. The final meaning of that refusal would only become clear later. In the months after the raid, analysts compiled data from thousands of sorties. Loss rates, altitudes, ammunition expenditure, interception patterns. The March 9th to 10th operation became a case study in how low-level night bombing changed the air war over Japan. Most attention went to what happened on the ground. Fire behavior, urban density, wind interaction, civil defense collapse. What happened in the air received less space. But among bomber crews, the lessons were quietly absorbed. The engagement showed that Japanese night fighters, even late in the war, could still mass locally and apply sustained pressure. It also showed the limits of that pressure. Ammunition constraints, fuel endurance, pilot fatigue, the inability to disengage cleanly once committed. It showed that ramming, while destructive, was not a guaranteed kill against a large, structurally redundant aircraft, especially one still under control. And it showed something else, less quantifiable. That disciplined gunnery mattered more than volume. That holding fire until geometry was right conserved lives as much as ammunition. That a bomber flown gently, even when damaged, could remain flyable far beyond what manuals suggested. None of this became doctrine overnight, but it filtered into training notes, into briefings, into the way crews talk to each other before missions. Fly it smooth. Don't chase. Let them come into sight. After the war, the aircraft itself faded into records. It was repaired. It flew again. Eventually, it was retired, like thousands of others. Its aluminum was scrapped. Its serial number became an entry in a ledger. What remained were the documents, damage assessment photographs, gun camera frames, debrief transcripts with timestamps down to the minute. They show no heroics, no speeches, no moment where probability visibly breaks, just continuity. Minute after minute where the aircraft remained airborne when loss would have been statistically reasonable. Engagement after engagement where gunners acted within limits rather than emotion. A pilot who never attempted anything dramatic because drama was unnecessary. Historians later resisted the temptation to inflate the story. 14 fighters destroyed is enough. 2 ramming attacks surviving is enough. 1 bomber returning intact is enough. Anything more would weaken it. In the end, this was not a story about invincibility. It was a story about margins. Margins of control. Margins of structure. Margins of human endurance. The B-29 did not win the war that night. It did something smaller and rarer. It demonstrated that even in an environment engineered to overwhelm, numbers, fire, darkness, exhaustion, outcomes were still decided by accumulation rather than inevitability. By one decision followed by another. By holding the line not once, but repeatedly, until dawn arrived and made survival visible. That is why the story endures. Not because the bomber destroyed 14 fighters, but because, by every reasonable calculation, it should have destroyed none. And yet, it came back.